Hi, everybody. My name is Andrey. We have Max here. We are both from Playwright core team. And today we will actually talk about Playwright for Python. So let me share my slides. So first and foremost, what is Playwright? Well, Playwright is a modern web testing and automation framework, which basically means that whatever you can do in a browser with your keyboard and mouse, you can also do in code with Playwright. It is reliable, powerful, and fast, and it supports all the modern browser engines, which are like today in modern web, it's Chromium, WebKit, and Firefox. And the cool thing is that you can actually drive these browsers on all of the operating systems that are widespread today, such as Windows, macOS, and Linux. And if, of course, once you have your tests and automations written, you can run them in the cloud on continuous integration. And if Docker is your thing, we also ship a Docker container, official Docker container that you can use as a base image. Now, last but not least, Playwright is actually free and open source. And importantly, you can actually use Playwright in a variety of different languages. So you can use Playwright in JavaScript, TypeScript, Python, Java, and .NET. But today, we will focus on Python. Okay, so we will structure today's talk in a way, like in an imaginary journey over the months of using Playwright in a new project. And let's consider today we have a first day, and the first day is when we meet Playwright. So the best way to actually meet Playwright is to go and see what it is. So I'll have a bunch of live demos today, and this is the first demo, how we get started with Playwright. So let me bring you to my terminal, and I'll actually start from scratch with the demo directory. And the first thing I do, I'll actually create a VM for me. So this is a usual thing, so that I can install my dependencies in an isolated way, and I'll activate it. Awesome. Let's make sure I have a proper Python version. Great. So now I'm actually ready to install Playwright here. I'll just do pip install Playwright, and it just installs the package here. Now, once I have Playwright installed, I can do Playwright install. So what this command will do, it will actually bring all the browsers to my machine. Now, in my case, all the browsers are already installed because these are cached locally. So it was instant for me. Okay, so this is all that was needed to get started with Playwright, and I'm actually ready to go coding. Now let's go and do something very simple here. So I'm here in my editor, and the first thing I do, I'll just import. Oops, I have this zoom thing that overlays my screen, so I cannot see much. Oh, I can move it. Okay, so first thing, I import the sync API. And it is important to say that we have both sync and async versions of API here. And then I can go and start coding. So first thing, I can launch a browser. And this is as simple as just say launch. And here I say Chromium because I want to launch Chromium. Next, I can just go and open a new page in this launch browser. And once I have page in hands, I can navigate it somewhere like. And with the page, I can do stuff. Let's just print its title. And last but not least, I have to close the browser. So this is it, 8 lines of code, does lots of things. Let's go and give it a try. Oof. Max, what did I do wrong?
You had a typo.
Where?
Sync Playwright, the right one. You miss a Y.
Where? Oh, here.
Yes.
Great. It's good to have a second pilot here. Awesome. So things work. And you saw that this thing launched, but we didn't see any browser windows showing up. This is because Playwright runs all the browsers in headless manner by default. But actually, this is not necessary. Like, I just want to prove you that things are actually opening browsers. And actually, I need to import time, I think, and do a little bit of a delay, because otherwise we won't see things happening. Okay, so 3 seconds pause, and we'll close. So it was a Chromium window. Pretty cool. Now, like, as easy as this, I can just launch Firefox, and I just need to change one single line here. And this is now a Firefox thing. Now, similarly, I can do the same thing with WebKit. And this all works the same way and across all of the operating systems. Okay, so it was pretty cool. Let's get back to our slides. So a quick recap. To install Playwright, you just need 2 commands, which is pip install and playwright install. And finally, the very first script that we can do is just to import Playwright sync API, and then launch a browser, launch a page, navigate the page, like you can do whatever. Okay, great. So surely Playwright is not the only and not the first browser automation solution for Python. So why would you actually use Playwright? Well, and to answer this question, I actually have these 3 beautiful words, which is capable, reliable, and future-proof. And by themselves, they mean nothing, but I will expand on each of them in context of Playwright. So first word is Playwright is capable, which means you can do lots of different things in Playwright, which are probably not possible in other web automation solutions. So you can, for example, emulate mobile devices, such as an iPhone, and using iPhone rendering engine like WebKit. You can emulate geolocation. We have the concept of browser contexts that let you isolate browser automations or tests between each other in a very efficient manner. It's much more efficient than just relaunching a browser. And you can actually sniff all the network that goes inside and outside of the browser. You can set up web proxies for it. And you can not only sniff the network traffic, but you can also intercept both requests and responses, and you can modify them however you wish. So this is very powerful to setting up mocks. And you can do many more things. You can actually emulate time zone and locale. You can emulate color schemes, and like the list goes on and on and on. If you just go to the playwright.dev and open the API page, you'll see that there are like the capabilities are literally limitless. Okay, so Playwright is capable. This was the first word. Second one, reliable. Yeah, and for reliable, I want to expand and actually to tell you about this auto waiting. And for this, we have a small example of a web form. Let's say, for example, I have this email password login form, and I want to fill it in with Playwright. So I can say, hey, Playwright, fill in my email here, and it will type in my email. Then you say, hey, put in my password here, and it will put password. And then you say, hey, Playwright, click submit, but you see that the button is actually disabled. So instead of trying to hit this button that is not clickable, Playwright will engage in something that we call auto waiting. So Playwright will make sure that the button will get enabled, and once it is enabled, only then it will click it, which makes the form submitting nice. So, in other words, every time you try to interact with a page using Playwright APIs, it will perform a sequence of checks. So for example, in case of a click, Playwright will first make sure that the element is attached. Then it will make sure that the element is actually visible. Then it will make sure that the element is actually stable. meaning that it's not shaking, not flying anywhere, like there is no animation, because it's kind of hard to click a button that's flying away. Then it will make sure that it receives all the events. And last but not least, in case of a button, it will make sure that the button is actually enabled and thus clickable. So form filling with Playwright is actually just a bliss. You navigate to your form, and then you fill in the fields one by one, and you don't care about anything else, because Playwright will make sure that your form is filled properly and the button is clicked. Okay, so this was auto-waiting, or what we call writing reliable web automations. And the last word that we had was future-proof. And this is actually just an excuse for me to talk about architecture of Playwright internally and to give you a sneak peek under the Playwright hood. So unlike some other web automations, Playwright does not use WebDriver protocol. Instead, for each of the three browsers that we have, we rely on their native debugging protocols. So in case of Chromium, this is a Chrome DevTools protocol. And in case of WebKit, this is Web Inspector protocol. And in case of Firefox, this is something called Juggler protocol. Now, our team used to be developing Chrome DevTools for 10 years. So we have great expertise in actually developing these remote debugging protocols. So we know how to inspect browsers and how to make them do very beautiful things. Now, at top of all these browsers, we have this Playwright driver, which is a unification driver layer, basically abstraction layer over the browsers. And finally, we have all the languages. So in case of Playwright Python talks to Playwright driver, which in turn talks to different browsers. So this architecture is what we were developing back in the days when we were doing Chrome DevTools. It's battle tested because we've been experimenting and playing with it for like more than 10 years of browser development. It's fast and reliable, we know that, and it has literally no limitations. Like all the capabilities that you saw that like Playwright can do, it can do because we have this direct access to browser internals. So it gives us lots of gains, and we know that no matter in which directions browsers will evolve in future, we will be able to adapt, and things will just work fast and reliable. So this was the last word. This was Playwright being future-proof. Okay, moving on. So we had our first day. We learned what Playwright is. We learned how to use it, how fast it is. Now, let's say we started writing a bunch of Playwright scripts. Now, it turns out it's a little bit slow to write them by hands. What if we can actually automate the whole process? And this is where Playwright codegen actually comes in. Let me show it to you. So I have this my demo project, and I'll just have Playwright codegen, and I'll specify output here. So once I run this command, it opens two windows for me. The first one is a Chromium window. I'll talk about it a little bit later. And the second one is this Playwright Inspector. Let me zoom it in for you so that you can see it better. Now, in Playwright Inspector, you have this red button, record, which is currently working, right? Let's see what it does. So let's go to the first window and type github.com/Microsoft, for example. Now we see that as I typed this command here in the browser window, the inspector recorded my action in actually Python API. So here I can go and continue interaction with the page. And by the way, you see that as I hover over the page, I have this black box with a selector. So this is the selector that will be used to record this action. Now, for example, I have two options. I can click this number, or I can click the issues word. But I want my automation to be reliable, so I probably don't want to hard code the number of issues. So I'll just click this issues text. So yeah, you see that everything I do is actually recorded. So let's stop here and let's just run this. and make sure that the whole thing actually works. Well, it did, and it was pretty fast. So this is what's called codegen, and you are free to go and edit this code if you wish. And this is how you can actually create lots of scripts real fast. We think it's very powerful. Okay, yeah, quick recap. You launch it with the Playwright codegen command. You can specify an output right away. And yeah, you just keep interacting with the browser. Okay, so moving on. So let's say you now have a bunch of scripts and they all ran, but can we actually do real web tests? And how do we debug them if something goes wrong? So this is another demo I want to show you. So far, we were doing just plain Python automations. These were self-contained Python scripts. But in Python, we have this awesome PyTest. And in case of Playwright, we have PyTest Playwright package. Let's install it. And let's do a simple test in the PyTest dialect. Test landing, for example, and I can say test landing page. And in PyTest for Playwright, you are given this fixture, a page fixture, right away that you can use to test different things. For example, let's just go to example.com, and I can assure that page title is, what was it? Example domain, I guess. Let's see if I'm right. I can just run it right away. And yes, it was good. Let's see how it fails, just so that I'm not lying to you. Okay, yes, all works. Now, let me actually fix it. How would I debug it? I can just open VS Code here. And as I open the test, I hope the font is good enough. Max, let me know if you don't see anything. I hope you do. We have this testing lab icon here on the left-hand side. I can click it and say configure Python tests. And it will ask me, like, is it a PyTest or unit test? And we say, yes, this is a PyTest. And please use our root directory for our tests. Let's do this real quick. And now we have this green button. I can use it right away just to run my test. It's really fast. And to debug it, I can say this breakpoint here and hit right button, debug. So as we are debugging a test, we are right away engaged in a headful mode. So we can see the browser. And I can actually use this terminal to interact with the page. For example, I can say page.locator body.highlight. Oh, there is no bodied, should be body. And it will highlight the body for me. So this way I can actually play with different selectors. And I can actually even do evaluations. I can say evaluate navigator user agent, for example. And this way you can get a snippet of JavaScript code and run it inside the page. So we get this. So this is real cool. And you can open DevTools here on the page if you wish and do your debugging. But long story short, you can continue. And well, these are your tests. Cool. So quick recap. So you can use PyTest, and we have a really powerful integration plugin for Playwright called PyTest Playwright. And tests are easily debuggable with VS Code. Okay. So this is the end of our month. So let's say we had lots of tests. They were all working. Every time you had an issue, you were able to debug it with VS Code. Now, let's say, for example, that you had an issue on your CI. So your test bot, some of the tests were failing on your test bot, but you had absolutely no way to reproduce this failure locally. So how would you go about it? How would you debug it? Like, wouldn't it be cool if you could just get and replay the test execution that happened somewhere far, far away, here locally on your machine so that you can see what was going on and what was going wrong. Well, it turns out there is a way to do this, and it's called Playwright Tracing. So let me tell you a little bit about it. So Playwright Tracing is actually a technology that consists of two parts. So first part is this very powerful artifact that's called trace.zip file that contains all kinds of information about the test run. It has Playwright actions, it has all the events that we sent, it has the screencast, like all the video of your test execution. It has the network log and console log, and it even has DOM snapshots. And once you collect these trace zip files, these artifacts, you use the second part of this technology, which is called a trace viewer. And these days, you can easily just access trace viewer on this URL on https://trace.playwright.dev. So let me actually show you what it is and how to use it. So for this, I'll go back to my demo, and here I have a website. It was created specifically for this conference, and I have a workflow here. It's a GitHub Actions workflow, and for some reason, this workflow is actually failing for me. So I can open these tests, and well, something was going wrong. There is some issue. Let's say I don't know what it is. What do I do about it? Well, I have this artifact that I uploaded on my GitHub Actions, so I can just download the whole thing and expand. Now I have this trace.zip file, and to open it, I go to trace.playwright.dev, and this is the website. Let's move this Zoom thing. This website is actually a standalone application. I can just drag and drop my trace zip file here, and it opens this fancy UI for you. Now, very important, none of this information is actually sent to any servers. Whole processing is happening here locally on my machine. Okay, so lots of things are actually shown here. Let me introduce you to this UI. So it actually has 4 parts. Here at the top, we have a timeline of the text execution. And as I hover over this timeline, I can see a screencast, like what was going on with the page. We can see that there was some loading, then there was some navigation. This was actually a GitHub automation. Now, here on the left-hand side, we have an actions sidebar. And these are all the things that my script was doing, one by one. So it was navigating somewhere, clicking some locators, and whatnot. I also have a metadata, a bunch of useful information about the browser that was running this automation. Okay, for each selected action here, on the right-hand side, I have all the meta details about this action. For example, I can see what kind of call it was, right? I can see everything that happened in browser console during this call. And I also see all the network requests. I can go and see there. And this is a navigation request. So naturally, it has lots of network going on. And I even can see the source of my test here. So this is my automation, and this is my page.goto command. Okay. Finally, in the middle of the screen, we have this page. And this is not a screenshot. This is actually a DOM snapshot, which means I can select text like it's a real HTML. The whole thing is interactable. I can even type here, but there is no JavaScript. But the thing is, you can actually open DevTools. Let me open DevTools and use this inspect to go and navigate around this page. So if you don't know what's going on, you can always go and see under the hood. So which is very cool. Okay. So, the other thing that I wanted to show here, in case of clicks, for example, you can see this red dot. This is where Playwright was actually aiming when it was performing a click. And we were clicking on this input, and it was just right in the middle of the input. Okay, so unwinding the stack back, we came here because something wasn't working. And right here, we see this exclamation mark. It turns out, let's go and see. So we had this locator click that timed out because it's waiting on selector with something with text woof. And clearly this page has nothing with this barking sound. So it did a fair job timing out. So this is a trace viewer. And this is how you can do actually post-mortem debugging with Playwright. Okay, and this was the last day of our journey. So quick recap. This is what Playwright Tracing looks like. It has 4 parts, and it lets you debug things that happen somewhere far, far away. And yeah. So if you liked what we do, if you like Playwright, we have a bunch of resources to continue learning. We have our website. Official website is playwright.dev. It has lots of information and very fancy documentation about all the languages. We are developing out in the open on GitHub. So if you have any issues, something doesn't work, please do not hesitate to reach out to Microsoft/Playwright and file an issue against us. And finally, we have a bunch of social channels that we use. We have a Slack channel, and this is a really good community, like very vibrant community. So if you have any questions and you want answers right away, please head over to our Slack. We have a Twitter channel where we publish all the updates and all the interesting information about Twitter, about Playwright, of course. And monthly, we have releases and about each release, we do a video with overview of the release that we publish on our YouTube channel. Yeah, so please subscribe and give us a like and stuff. So my name is Andrey. This is Playwright, and Max is online. And if you have any questions, this is a good time to ask them.
So the first question is, what's coming next for Playwright for Python?
So we can split this question in like 2 parts. So first, Playwright in general, we always aim to add features across all the language ports. So if you have like a feature request, either file it inside the Playwright Python repository or just Playwright. And then based on the demand, we measure it with uploads, we add new features. The other part are like language-specific features, like for Python, we have this Python plugin. So if you have there any feature requests, it's the same story, like file an issue with a feature request there, we measure upvotes and then add it.
Roberto has the next questions. Are web drivers required? If yes, that install command will be installing them.
Playwright is significantly different to other competitors, so we don't rely on WebDriver technology or on the WebDriver standard. If you install Playwright with Playwright install, it will download a very recent Chromium build and also Firefox and WebKit. So WebDriver is not required, and Playwright has their own dedicated browsers. And for Chromium-specific browsers, you can use something which we call channels. So all the Chromium-related family browsers, including Microsoft Edge, Google Chrome, I think Opera as well, you can just put in a short name for the channel and it will work out of the box.
And kind of a follow-up on that, Ben asked, does Playwright use cookies from the desktop app? For instance, if I'm logged into a website on Chromium, will I be logged in on Playwright?
So when running tests, it's always very important to have like reproducible tests, right? So by default, Playwright will not use any cookies from like existing Google Chrome profiles, but we have something which we call launch persistent context. And there you could specify an existing directory where the existing cookies get loaded from.
Excellent. And then Raphael has a 2-part question. The first is, does Playwright have support for iOS, Android apps written in Flutter?
So Playwright is currently targeted at web applications. I think Flutter also has a mode to expose it as a web application, if I remember correctly. So if you target Flutter in that way and then just navigate to that URL, it would work. Also, Playwright has an experimental Android mode. So you can have any arbitrary Android device, like a real phone or just an Android emulator, and then connect to it, and it will run the tests on this actual device or emulator.
Thank you so much. And then the second part of Raphael's question is, how is your support for CI/CD integration? Can we run tests in parallel to finish tests faster?
So we have our own dedicated page for CI/CD. We provide a Docker image which contains the required Linux dependencies as well as the browsers. To answer the question with parallel test, Playwright, especially like the JavaScript test runner, supports both horizontal and vertical parallelization, and in Python the same. We rely there on the PyTest for now, and I think there's a plugin to specify like how many workers there should be on the machine. I think it's called the PyTest xdist and PyTest-parallel, and I think there's also parallel to shard the test, so you can run it on multiple arbitrary machines as well. So basically, all the features which PyTest supports, you can just install your favorite plugin for that and it will work.